According to a recent poll, the vast majority of Kenyans are against a referendum. Hey, how? Now, there's a very bad history, or rather opinion polls in our country have a very bad history. And one cannot help, but refer back to this history with this latest opinion poll. Because I'm on the ground. I speak to people on the ground. We have indeed even seen people at TV stations carry out interviews on the streets. And indication from all these different interactions with the public are that a vast majority of Kenyans are in fact for a referendum. So how and why did the results come out like this for this particular poll? Now, this poll was carried out by the Star newspaper. The Star newspapers have a reputation. I mean, the Radio Africa group are fiercely independent. And they've been able to reveal and release information that other more established media would not want to touch. And yet, this is the same media group that has now come out with an opinion poll where they tell us 56% of Kenyans are against a referendum. And in that 56%, most of them are young people. And then only 44% are in support of a referendum. And of course, this poll was scientific. Now. The reason why I'm laughing is that the very first political poll in Kenya, during the reign of former President Daniel Toroitich arap Moi, also caught many Kenyans by surprise. This was at a time when most Kenyans had ganged up against the government of Daniel Toroitich arap Moi, the draconian government. The only supporters President Moi was left with then were sycophants and those hailing from his own Kalenjin community. Otherwise, the rest of Kenya was very, very emphatically against the Moi regime. And so, many Kenyans, including myself, and including my late political lecturer, were very sure that going into the election that we were about to go into at that time, that whether the opposition was united or divided, there was no way Moi would win the election. He did not have the numbers. And it was behind this backdrop that an opinion poll came out showing that if elections were held at that time, Moi would win. Moi was still the most popular presidential candidate. And of course, we were reminded that this poll was scientific. Scientific things cannot go wrong. Science is not based on trial and error. Science is exact. Well, I still remember my political lecturer's reaction when I mentioned the poll to him. And I'm sure most of you who are familiar to this channel will have a pretty good idea of what his response was. His response was, and I quote, "Rubbish." And then he proceeded to break down the way the entire country would vote. Now, one big advantage my political lecturer had over me at that time was that he understood the geography of the country like the back of his hand. He knew each and every constituency in Kenya and which tribal community was in that constituency and exactly how they would vote. I mean, one day he really shocked me and confused me when he correctly predicted the elections for members of parliament in all the Eldoret constituencies. And the reason why he was able to do this was because of his impeccable understanding of the geography of Eldoret and the surrounding region. I was working in the media then, and of course I was aware that there was a review of the parliamentary constituency boundaries across the country. But with his geographical knowledge, he was able to interpret this even before the elections. Because what Crafty Moi had done, he had divided the town constituencies in such a way that there wasn't a single constituency for the town, as it was before. A single constituency covering the town, and you know Eldoret is very cosmopolitan, was even more cosmopolitan then, yeah, and had a very large population of Kikuyus, would mean that the person who would win the parliamentary seat would be from the house of Mumbi. But Moi divided it in such a way that outside constituencies all ended at some point right within the town. So the town was divided, and each part of the town reached out to the rural areas close to the town, which meant majority of the voters suddenly changed to be members of the Kalenjin community. Now, there's no way you'd be able to analyze that unless you understood very clearly the geography of Eldoret and the surrounding areas. Anyway, back to the referendum. And so, his breaking down of how each and every part of the country would vote for president was correct, yeah, but it contradicted the election results which came out later. And it also sharply contradicted the opinion poll, the scientific opinion poll, which came out during the Moi reign. Fast forward to the 2017 elections, recent elections we have just been through. Yeah. Now, in those elections, I was also very much on the ground. Now, my coverage of the 2017 elections was very interesting because when we started out in the elections, I had not yet reached out to all my contacts on the ground. And therefore, the impression I had was that Jubilee indeed had the numbers. I believed the media reports that it was going to be a close election. Now, if you can go back to the videos I did at the time, which are on this channel, you'll be able to see that clearly. Because as we headed closer to the election, my coverage changed dramatically. And I was able to tell Kenyans that actually the person with the numbers, the presidential candidate with the numbers, was Raila Odinga and his NASA coalition. But the opinion polls then showed us very clearly that President Uhuru Kenyatta was in the lead. Yeah, and he never let go of the lead. Looking back now, it is super fascinating, and most of you will remember this, that close to the election, I think about a week or two before the elections, one particular pollster wanted to come out with a poll that showed actually Raila Odinga was in the lead. And this pollster gave Raila Odinga a lead of only 1 percentage point, which still contradicted what I had. Yeah, because according to what I had, Raila had an overwhelming lead. Now, why this is fascinating is why was it so sensitive to the government then that somebody should release a mere poll showing that Raila was leading? Why was it so sensitive? I think the answer is obvious. Part of the Cambridge Analytica strategy for Jubilee was to have polls that always consistently showed that Jubilee were ahead, so that Kenyans would be fooled into believing that actually they were more popular. So that when the results came out, the federal results came out, Kenyans would believe them. They would swallow them, hook, line, and sinker. Now, let me remind you of something very important. Those polls being carried out at that time were not being carried out by some Juakali outfits in River Road. No way. Those polls were being carried out by internationally recognized multinational pollsters. And of course, they were scientific. And so, coming back to the present, the current poll showing that most Kenyans are against the referendum is scientific. And it's also carried out by a very reputable media house in Kenya. I don't think I need to say anymore. Until next time, this is Kshs, Kumekucha.